Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the death of Ish-Bosheth. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 4. To bring you up to speed so far, 2 Samuel had started off where an Amalekite comes to David. He's trying to curry favor with David by bringing news of Saul's death, and he takes credit for it. We're not entirely sure if he's being truthful or not, but he says that he had killed Saul, and as a result, that Amalekite is put to death because he had laid hands upon the Lord's anointed, and David has him killed, and then he laments over Saul and Jonathan and over the fact that they have died. Then in 2 Samuel chapter 3, we had Abner. He comes and seeks to curry favor with David by negotiating the delivery of the kingdom. He says, look, I'll take it away from Ish-Bosheth, the son of Saul, and I'll give it to you, David. And it sounds like he's doing I don't know if it's honorable. I think he's probably got a vested interest. And then Joab kills him, and Abner is murdered. And then David, not approving of that murder, David laments over Abner. Now as we come to chapter 4 and verse 1, now we read, now when Ish-Bosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage. After all, Abner had been his right-hand man. Even though Abner was ready to take the kingdom away from him and give it to David, Abner had been his right-hand man, also was his uncle. He was the strength of the northern kingdom of Israel and of those Israelite tribes that were following Ish-Bosheth. And now he loses courage, and all Israel was disturbed because their king doesn't have anybody to back him up, and their king looks like just sort of very afraid. Verse 2, Saul's son had two men who were commanders of bands. Abner is out, but there are these other two, we'll call them captains. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite. Of the sons of Benjamin for Beeroth, Beeroth just means, Beer is the word for well, and the oath is feminine plural, so the wells, apparently that was the name of the town, is also considered part of Benjamin. And the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have been aliens there until this day. So here's a group that had to leave Benjamin, the tribal inheritance of Benjamin. They had to go to another place. Now they've been associated with Saul because, after all, he's from Benjamin, and now they're associated with Saul's son, but they're a little bit on the outs. And I think maybe that affects their judgment because they've been on the outs and they want to get back in. Verse 4. Now, verse 4 is almost like a footnote, as it were, because it's as an aside, but we're talking about Saul's sons. So we read, now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a cripple in his feet, a son that was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, which had happened back at the very beginning of 2 Samuel. And his nurse took him up and fled, and it happened that in a hurry to flee, he fell and became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth. We're not going to see him until much later in the story, but it's mentioned now just to put it in chronological order. Meanwhile, back to our story, verse 5. So the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, departed and came to the house of Ish-Bosheth in the heat of the day while he was taking his midday rest. There are places in the sort of hot zones, the zones down closer to the equator, but not just there. Notice even in Israel, which is pretty far north of the equator, where in the heat of the day, you don't really accomplish a lot, so you take your siesta, you take your nap there, and this is what was happening. Verse 6, they came to the middle of the house as if to get wheat, and they struck him in the belly, and Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. So they've murdered the surviving son of Saul. They have murdered Ish-Bosheth. Verse 7, now when they came into the house, as he was lying in his bedroom, they struck him and killed him and beheaded him, and they took his head and traveled by way of the Arabah all night. Apparently they go down along the area that's close to the Jordan River, that area on the east side of the mountain range, sort of desert-like. They're traveling out of the way, and they come all night, and they're going to come to David. And Rehoboam and Baanah, they seek to curry favor with David by murdering Ish-Bosheth. And they show up and they say, hey, look at what we did. Behold, this is verse 8. Behold the head of Ish-Bosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life, and now we give it to you. And so now we were sort of on the outs with him, but now we can be on the inside with you. And David answers, he says, what did you do? Verse 9, as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, when one told me, saying, behold, Saul is dead, and thought he was bringing me good news, I seized him and killed him in Ziklag, while the reward I gave him, that was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more? They killed Saul, who was acting badly. You have killed somebody that wasn't acting bad. Yes, he wasn't necessarily my friend, but he hadn't done anything wrong. Verse 11, how much more when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I not now require his blood from your hand and destroy you from off the earth? And so David has them executed. And now, verse 12, then David commanded the young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hung them up beside the pool of Hebron. But they took the head of Ish-Bosheth and buried it in the grave of Abner in Hebron. So the head, of course, he can't do anything about the rest of the body. He hasn't got that. But he takes the head of Ish-Bosheth and has it buried, given an honorable burial. So that what David is doing, he's showing in all three cases. When Saul was killed, when Abner was killed, now when Ish-Bosheth has been killed, all three episodes have led to the rise of David. But David took no part in that. David did not reward it. He was not seeking it. He was going to allow the Lord to raise him up. He was not going to do that by his own hand. It reminds us of the greater David, how Jesus came and did not lift himself up by his own hand, but was lifted up upon the cross, and yet God raised him from the dead. And so he has become the exalted king by his heavenly Father, by God the Father.